There's a reason why people are broke, lonely, depressed, anxious, overworked, underpaid, disenfranchised, and unfulfilled. That reason was rooted in thinking from economists, perpetuated by your politicians and your institutions that you trusted, and solidified through your workplace, your culture, your films, your TV, your music, and your media. You see it every single day in your supermarket, in your gym, at work, in the high street. That thing is individualism. In this video, I'll explain the origins of individualism, how it's been shaped into something that seems natural, a logical conclusion to human modern civilization, and why that is wrong. I'll show you why collectivism has always been the answer to all of your problems, and why that's already how we live, and how you can break free of the individualist myth.
Ideas like the individual's right to reach as far and as high as his or her talents will permit.
One of the things that characterizes the radical left types is they don't give a damn about you as an individual or about individuals at all.
Freedom and equal opportunity to the individual. Will his initiative and enterprise spur on the march of progress? And in our insistence on equality of opportunity, has our system advanced beyond the whole world?
We believe they should be individuals. A man's right to work as he will, to spend what he earns, to own property, to have the state as servant and not as master. They are the essence of a free economy, and on that freedom all our other freedoms depend.
Sounds harmless on the surface, right? It maybe even sounds logical. We are all, in fact, individuals, and after all, isn't a collective just a group of individuals? We all enjoy our individuality, particularly in the West. We like to have our own opinions, our own styles, our own way of thinking, and our own way of seeing the world. We like to feel like we are our own person, with our own unique thoughts and feelings. Individualism in this sense is philosophical. The damage is done when that philosophy becomes economic. As an individual operating economically, your social relations change. Suddenly, you're just one person responsible for everything in your own life, which means success or failure on your own terms. But that means that your material existence is your own and only your own. That creates a zero-sum game, where suddenly it seems like there's finite resources to go around, and what you need in order to survive, you have to make sure that you, individually, have enough. In order for you to have some, that means that somebody must have less. And just like a cancer, this idea, as it deepens and spreads through our economy, our politics and our society, it starts to affect the way that we see everything. If we're all individuals, why do we need to help others? Why should they get the help if you didn't? Why should they have an easy life while you have a hard life? If we're all individuals, what separates your success from mine, or my success from anybody else's? If we're all individuals, how do I make sure I get what I need to look after me and my family? Suddenly, a society filled with individuals starts to look less like a society and more like the Hunger Games. To understand how a social philosophical idea like this becomes material and economical, we have to trace it back to its origins, back to the Chicago School of Economics. Here we go again. There's three key ways that individualist myth gets perpetuated. In your academia, in your institutions, and in your politics. They don't explicitly say it, individualism is a natural law, but they say everything but that. And it's implicit in everything they do say. Let's trace the academia and the institutions that believe this academia, and then the politicians that calcify it. So, as always with this sort of stuff, we're starting with Adam Smith. He says in The Wealthy Nations, Book 1, Chapter 2, "But man has almost constant occasion for the help of his brethren, and it is in vain for him to expect it from their benevolence only." So here, Adam Smith is talking about the division of labour. He accepts that we all require cooperation, but that cooperation is driven primarily by our own self-interest as individuals. We're all rational individual actors who by barter, trade and purchase obtain that which we individually need. I think Smith is often wrongly co-opted here, but this is usually the basis for any conversation about individualism within a free market. Then we get to Milton Friedman. Fucking hell, I hate this guy. He said in Capitalism and Freedom that the ultimate goal of a liberal society is freedom of the individual. The individual is responsible for his own actions. Friedman frames consumer choice as individual freedom. So now you get to vote with your wallet, right? He frames social outcomes, such as income, health, education, as aggregated individual decisions. So a group of individual decisions all aggregated together. This reinforces narratives around personal responsibility. The individual is the reason that the individual is either succeeding or struggling, right? and he massively downplays structural constraints. Now we get to Gary Becker. He goes a little bit further and he treats all behaviour as a result of an individual maximising their own utility. He says that individuals maximise their utility from a stable set of preferences and accumulate an optimal amount of information and other inputs in a variety of markets. Bit word salad, but to put this in plain terms, think of someone choosing a job, or anything really. They, based on their preferences, they look at the options available to them, they weigh the options up and they pick the best one that they think is available to them. The individual drives their own decision making, right? Almost as if they live in a vacuum. He applies this to things like education, relationships and crime. So how do these ideas become policy? Well, that's via our institutions, right? Big, critical institutions that govern us. They've taken these ideas and embedded them into deep policy prescriptions.
We've just heard from the Chancellor. She's released a statement and she says this is the 6th interest rate cut since the election. That's the fastest pace of cuts in 17 years. Good news for families with mortgages and businesses with loans. But I know there's more to do to help families with the cost of living.
There's the World Bank and the IMF. As we've seen in this video, the World Bank and the IMF frame growth through individual enterprise and competition. That's the thing they're always trying to stimulate. And they're often sidelining collective ownership models or any form of state-led development. They impose structural adjustment policies that emphasise liberalisation and fiscal discipline. All this is in the assumption of efficient outcomes coming from individual market actors, rather than any sort of coordinated public planning or state control, which they will always and have aimed to reverse. And then there are 2 more examples that you're probably familiar with. Let's look at the Federal Reserve in America and the Bank of England in the UK. Now, neither of these institutions directly allocate resources themselves, right? Instead, it shapes the economy by changing the price of borrowing via interest rates. So this is based on the individual that the assumption is provided an option for them to choose from, right? Do households save or do they borrow? Do companies consolidate or do they borrow to grow? This makes the lever of the economy at the level of individual and their choices based on their own preferences, right? So rather than saying, here's all the money that could be given out, right, and let's redistribute it based on whatever mechanisms, right? So the state literally takes money and hands it out. What they do say is, here is a pot of money at a certain price. It's up to you to decide whether that's good for you or not and whether to take it or not. So what that does is it makes collective outcomes driven by individual choice. That's how that's permeated through our institutions. So how do you then take that and turn it into live reality? That's always spend a lot of time looking through footage for this bloody woman. But Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher, outright rejected society as a meaningful unit and promoted individual responsibility. Her policies privatised most of our state assets and they weakened collective institutions like trade unions, and she embedded market individualism into everyday life. Similarly, across the pond, Ronald Reagan, who I also have to watch too much bloody footage of, he advanced deregulation, tax cuts and anti-union policies, very, very similar policy prescriptions in both countries. He framed government as the problem, wanting to elevate individual enterprise and at the same time undermined collective bargaining and any sense of public provision. And a little bit more recently we got David Cameron. He framed it a little bit differently in what he called the big society, which again focused on a small state, and he shifted the responsibility for the state to individuals and their individual communities. His austerity policies directly reduced access to collective provisions and services, while his government elevated the idea of personal and local initiative. Each time it's dressed up as if it's common sense, right? Natural ways of thinking. Even Cameron's big society basically said it's your problem to deal with, not ours. And that feels right intuitively, right? You are responsible for your own life, you are the agent of your own outcomes, right? So this is individualism as an economic imperative, framed as a natural and obvious truth and a way of organising ourselves. But when we look around us, we don't actually see individuals really. Nearly everything we interact with is as a result of a collective somewhere. But our media landscape elevates the individual. So this is all to say, I know we're not all sat around listening to politicians' speeches, right? We don't learn these sorts of things from reading dossiers from the IMF or the World Bank. And nobody's spending loads of time trawling through the ideologies of the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve. So how do these ideas come to permeate our day-to-day lives so deeply? Well, you do see this everywhere all around you.
Jordan, open, Chicago with the lead. Brady, end zone touchdown. To White. He's in. Brady has his 5th. Messi is in the middle of that pack. He might have just won the World Cup tonight. Messi. Oh, Messi!
And there is one other huge thing in our culture that tells us exactly what we need to know about the power of the collective, and we consume it so much. In fact, an estimated 4.5 billion people watch this globally. And once again, the focus is on the individual. This is sports. Take football, for example. CR7, Cristiano Ronaldo, right? Often discussed as one of the greatest players of all time. But the criticism that always follows him is usually the same one. And it tells us a lot. When things go wrong, it's often framed as a failure to involve the rest of his team. He does not make the team better. And actually, in some cases, he actively makes the team worse by his individual presence. He never passes the ball, right? He's always in it for himself. Across the pond, American football is a good example of this too. You look at Tom Brady, right? Treated as the defining quarterback of his era. But the moments when he was not winning championships, they're not explained through his individual performance alone. The dominant explanation of when they didn't win a Super Bowl was structural, right? The supporting cast, the offensive line, the front office, the back office, the defense, the coaching system. In other words, the team, the whole franchise. A little bit more niche, but just to cover all bases. Lance Armstrong's 7 Tour de France victories, regardless of what you think about that, were later revealed not simply as his individual endurance feats, but as the output of a highly institutional machine, right? The US Postal Service. It's the team structure and the tactics of that team, which involved a whole ton of people, and notoriously, a really wide culture of systematic doping that was carried out by small groups of people all over the sport, that protected him and also elevated him to his position of champion. The collective always stands to uplift, protect, and support the individual in every single case. But our media celebrates the individuals. Even though it's actually the collective that wins the title, we always focus on the figureheads. Our culture and our sport normalises the individual over the collective. Even though the collective is the thing that succeeds, the individual is representative of that wider collective and usually takes a humongously disproportionate amount of the spoils. Thanks so much for watching so far. Really hope you're enjoying it. I'd love to do this full time, and there's a few ways that you can help me. One, you could always buy me a coffee. And thanks to everybody that has so far, that's allowed me to get this better microphone, because that last one was cheap and it sucked. So thanks so much for everybody that's helped out with that. Really, really appreciate it. Secondly, you can hit like, hit subscribe, and most importantly, share it. The more people my content reaches, the faster I'll be able to grow. And the faster, hopefully, I'll be able to do this full time, which means more reading, more learning, more digesting, more writing, more videos, and more content overall. So hope you're enjoying it, and I'll let you get back to the video.
Gosh, I don't know. I'd imagine he's quite sort of clever, intellectual.
Misogynist.
Dependable.
I think he's a very good bloke.
And magnificent.
Incredibly reasonable, rational.
Narcissist.
He's got some ideas are right, but I think he's a bit extreme.
Neutral positive.
Everything he does have an effect, like when he's bombing other countries, or he's giving support for Israel or not, or support for Ukraine or not.
In the context of sports, it all seems pretty benign, right? Sure, this says a lot about what we do with resource distribution, how we distribute gains, how we distribute success, fame, glory, celebrity culture, and whatnot. But beyond that, what is the harm of focusing on the individual? After all, Cristiano Ronaldo, Tom Brady, Lance Armstrong, they are generational talents. Super hardworking, super naturally gifted athletes. There's no denying that. When we focus on the individual, what that starts to do, slowly over time, is shape our collective culture. Tom Brady was an exceptional quarterback, no doubt about it. But his ability to be an exceptional quarterback doesn't really say much of anything about his ability to do anything else. Look at his nutrition plan, right? What is it, TB12? He tried to sell that to everybody else. This works for him, is it going to work for you? Well, maybe, but if you work in a 9-to-5 corporate office job, you don't really need Tom Brady's nutrition routine. Plus, he has a completely different body to you. Our culture doesn't want to accept this. It wants us to think that we can all be like the one-in-a-generation talent. We all want to be Cristiano Ronaldo as far as our culture is concerned. It wants us to believe that just by tweaking a few things, buying a few things here and there, changing our mindset and reading a few books, maybe getting up a little bit earlier, we can be one-in-a-generation talent and we can live just like them. This creates ubiquity within our culture and what we strive for individually. And it gets framed around a small handful of people. And what this does is it has us striving to achieve and worrying about all the wrong things. Exceptional individuals are great, of course they are, but only as part of the collective that facilitates their abilities, harnesses them, and gives them the means to flourish. In sports, you don't win through great individuals alone. And if you're relying on your great individuals, you're effectively leaving it to chance. It's the collective that wins the game, that wins the championship, that wins the trophy. And the big lesson in all those successes, it isn't what does Tom Brady eat in the morning, what time does Cristiano Ronaldo get out of bed. The real lessons is around the structures that harness those individuals, got the best out of them, and integrated them into a bigger collective for a singular purpose, be it a Champions League, a yellow jersey, or a Super Bowl ring. Beyond this, individualism harms us in a myriad other ways. If you take this idea and take it into our politics, you'll see how we focus too much on the individuals. We see the heads of parties as the party themselves. We ascribe entire political ideologies to individuals who may or may not even believe what they say publicly. We give them enormous amounts of power. For a democratic system, we lean incredibly heavily on a small number of individuals who have a lot of autonomy to do whatever they think is right. They become figureheads, and in a way, they become black holes that suck everything in around them. Let me read you this from Grace Blakely. Leaders learn to identify with their political projects and attach their sense of self to their success or failure. In the process, they become rigid and inflexible, certain that they're only able to chart the right course forward and surrounding themselves with yes men. Eventually, dissent is stifled and alternatives are foreclosed, not because unity is necessary for progress, it often is, but because alternative opinions have become a threat to the identities of those involved. In short, our political leaders are flawed human beings just like the rest of us. These flaws cannot be rooted out by self-work, but they can be managed out by effective movements. Think about those words. They're crucial. It's the collective that has the power, and it's the collective that we should believe in, not the individual. Think about each political party from your respective country. Chances are, you think firstly of the individual. The party is defined by each person. As a result, it means we don't vote for policies really. We don't really vote for values. We don't vote for ideologies. Ultimately, we vote for the individual. And that's just got to change.
Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all. The wood from which it's made, for all I know, comes from a tree that was cut down in the state of Washington. To cut down that tree, it took a saw. To make the saw, it took steel. To make the steel, it took iron ore. This black center, we call it lead, but it's really graphite, compressed graphite. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I think it comes from some mines in South America. This red top up here, the eraser, bit of rubber, probably comes from Malaya, where the rubber tree isn't even native. It was imported from South America by some businessmen with the help of the British government. This brass ferrule, I haven't the slightest idea where it came from, or the yellow paint, or the paint that made the black lines, or the glue that holds it together. Literally thousands of people cooperated to make this pencil. People who don't speak the same language, who practice different religions, who might hate one another if they ever met. When you go down to the store and buy this pencil, you are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those thousands of people. What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was a magic of the price system, the impersonal operation of prices that brought them together and got them to cooperate to make this pencil so that you could have it for a trifling sum. That is why the operation of the free market is so essential, not only to promote productive efficiency, but even more, to foster harmony and peace among the peoples of the world.
That's bloody Milton Friedman, telling you about how a pencil gets made. So where this idea doesn't work for our culture, where we see the individual put at the top when it's the collective that delivers the goods, the same is true for our economy, right? It's not individuals who drive anything other than the media attention. It's the collective. Companies are inherently collectivized, heavily centrally planned structures. The market's not a collection of individuals like Friedman puts it. It's a collection of collectivized, interdependent actors who all come together for one common goal. In this book, The People's Republic of Walmart, Lee Phillips and Mikkel Rozwarski concluded that planning exists all around us, and it clearly works. Otherwise, capitalists would not make such a comprehensive use of it. From Amazon's warehouses to Foxconn's factories, where your phones are made, to all major branches of industry, the capitalist system operates without price signals and markets. It plans, and it plans well. Friedman actually said it himself with his pencil analogy. He was just wrong about why. Individual activity is subordinated into centrally planned collective systems. And Walmart and Amazon give us two clear examples of how this is done. Within Walmart, the individual doesn't act as an independent economic agent in any meaningful sense. Inside big firms like Walmart and Amazon, allocations planned, roles are assigned, behaviour is structured. The free individual making market choices. It's not how production actually works in practice. Similarly, all the outcomes are system level. You can't reduce them down to individual decisions. No single worker, manager, or executives, CEO, anything, chooses things like inventory flows, logistics, stock. Those emerge from integrated collectivized systems, which means you can't explain economic outcomes at the level of the individual, because they don't start at the level of the individual. The whole market depends on, ultimately, non-market related coordination. So the economy that people imagine, millions of independent individuals all coordinating through markets, like Milton Friedman said, it's not how most production actually comes to be. Yes, individuals act, but not autonomously and not under conditions that they chose. Firms such as Walmart and Amazon choose what choices are available and therefore what outcomes follow. So there's no autonomy within the individuals that operate. Seeing the producer and the consumer as two individuals is incomplete, doesn't give you the full picture. So let's talk through Walmart and Amazon to really get a sense of how this looks in practice.
Hey guys, welcome to Indy 3, one of Walmart's next generation fulfillment centers.
The WFS promise is that we'll get your items to you within 2 days. A lot of our sellers can't do that on their own. They need to leverage a larger fulfillment network, and we can do that at low cost so that they're able to use our fulfillment solution to bring even more assortment onto Walmart.com, and all of that just helps the customer get more of what they want from a name that they trust.
The individuals working at Walmart and the consumers buying from Walmart are all part of one big system that operates like this. So inventory levels are allocated through centralized forecast systems. Supply chains become coordinated globally through a singular logistical structure. And distribution is not determined by spontaneous local decision making on an individual level. It's planned demand projection. And prices are set centrally using huge sums of aggregated data. Obviously, it's not negotiated at the point of sale, but the individuals don't influence that as consumers. That's set and baked deeply into the system long before you ever walk through a Walmart doors. Walmart have built what is one of the most sophisticated, centrally planned distribution systems ever made. They get sales data, which flows into a central system, which predicts demand, instructs suppliers, allocates stock, and optimizes transport routes and warehouse flows. This replaces what otherwise would be market coordination, right, between individuals with direct administrative planning. You still get a competition between firms, but planning dominates within Walmart. Just as a bit of a segue, there's a company called Sears. It was taken over by a guy called Edward Lampert. What he decided to do was the opposite of what Walmart have done, right? He took a highly interdependent system and broke down each individual department into individual businesses that were supposed to compete with one another. The whole thing fell to bits. It massively accelerated the decline of Sears and was, for all intents and purposes, quite a big failure in that experiment. Oh, thanks so much for watching so far. Really hope you're enjoying it. I'd love to do this full time, and there's a few ways that you can help me. One, you could always buy me a coffee. And thanks to everybody that has so far that's allowed me to get this better microphone, because that last one was cheap and it sucked. So thanks so much for everybody that's helped out with that. Really, really appreciate it. Secondly, you can hit like, hit subscribe, and most importantly, share it. The more people my content reaches, the faster I'll be able to grow. And the faster, hopefully, I'll be able to do this full time, which means more reading, more learning, more digesting, more writing, more videos, and more content overall. So hope you're enjoying it, and I'll let you get back to the video. The reason that didn't work is because huge systems like that rely on things working together, right? So the less you can treat each part as if it's independent and in competition, the better it performs. That then doesn't damage how the whole thing functions, right? Go back to the football teams. Go back to your American football teams. Go back to your cycling teams. So again, this isn't saying that individuals don't exist. What it is saying is that in a tightly connected system, outcomes are not driven by isolated individual choices. They're driven by how well those parts work together, not how well they operate independently. Back to Amazon. Amazon takes this logic one step further and makes it a bit more opaque. So on the surface level, Amazon presents itself as a marketplace, right? Millions of individual sellers, products, choices. When you get underneath it, it looks a little different, right? Search rankings are ultimately what determines what's visible and therefore what sells. You can only buy what you see, right? Who's digging around in pages and pages of Amazon? Nobody. It's like Google search, right? You take what's on the first page. Pricing is continuously adjusted by algorithms. Warehouse labor is directed in real time by software. Supply chains become integrated into Amazon's fulfillment infrastructure, and demand is predicted and in some cases preemptively stocked before purchase. Amazon are almost able to set demand by predicting demand. So again, it appears like a market stall, right? Like your Sunday market down in the town centre. Decentralized individual exchange. But it's not, again, it's algorithmically controlled central planning. And then your third-party sellers, supposedly independent, get pulled into this same infrastructure, get pulled into this same ecosystem. They end up optimizing for Amazon's algorithm so that they become visible. They depend on Amazon's logistics and on its data and on them for visibility, and their behavior then becomes shaped by the rules that Amazon set. Amazon takes this one step further by not just internalizing production and distribution, but it actually internalizes the conditions which in everybody participates within that, right? So it sets the rules by which the individuals can act. Again, the producer, the buyer, the seller, all their behavior driven by this centralized planning system. So when individualism is used to describe how the economy functions, it actually isn't describing its structure, despite what Milton Friedman wants you to know.
Amazon's latest fulfillment center in Arlington is the largest in the state, processing tens of thousands of orders every single day. But before it reaches your door, every item goes through a labyrinth of conveyor belts and are handled by both humans and advanced robotics. To protect their workers, Amazon employees take several different stations during a work week to avoid repetition and monotony.
Well, what have we learned from this? We've learned that individualism as an idea not only goes against the way that we organize ourselves and our society, but it's incredibly toxic for us. By breaking us all down into individuals that compete against one another, it actively prevents us from coming together. And all the best things in life are created by groups of people that come together. And so why would political power be any different, right? When we focus on individuals, and when we focus on us as individuals, we will lose. But while we focus as a collective, we stand a chance of winning. Karl Marx can help us understand this, right? Just to drive this point home, zoom out a little bit, right? Forget about us as a society and as individual cultures and countries, etc. Think about us as the human race, right? For hundreds of years. And then place yourself on the timeline of humanity's progress, right? And think about everything that came before you. So even if we were individuals all competing with one another and that's what drove things forward and that's what produced good outcomes, even if that were true, you are still dependent on what came before you. You're still dependent on billions of other people who have come before you and produced ideas, written things down, designed new things, invented new things, built things, written things. And so even if now we were individuals, we still rely on the collective that came before us. Let me talk about what I mean using Karl Marx. Everything that you have in your life relies on socialized gains, right? So you benefit from the collective knowledge and the collective output of everybody that came before you. Think about your phone, right? So this is, I guess, the Marxist equivalent of what Friedman was talking about. This object, your phone, it contains the labor of miners in the Congo, engineers in Taiwan, assembly workers in Shenzhen, shipping crews all across the Pacific, decades of accumulated scientific and technical knowledge that no single person or company produced. It contains the energy and time of thousands of people that you'll never meet. And yet it sits in your hand as if Apple made it, as if Tim Cook made it. Like a branch going from a tree, Apple is just an extension of an already realized social production network, spanning space and time. This is what Karl Marx calls commodity fetishism. Social relations start to disappear, and all that gets left is the product and the price. And you forget all the humanity that went into that. Karl Marx puts it like this: the worker is brought face to face with the intellectual potentialities of the material process of production as a property of another, and as a power which rules over him. That is to say, the collective knowledge that once belonged to workers gets absorbed into the machinery and the technical know-how and comes back to confront those workers as somebody else's property. Science, generally speaking, costs the capitalist nothing, a fact that by no means prevents him from exploiting it. Now, the point Marx is making there isn't necessarily about individualism or collectivization, but we can take that from that, right? So this idea of the individual entrepreneur, right? Individual enterprising attitude of somebody. You are reliant on the collective to get your product to market. There's an important related concept here that Marx has developed that's called the general intellect. It's the accumulated knowledge of humanity, including science, language, technical skills, and the cultural production built up across generations of collective effort. The language you think in wasn't invented by you. The maths behind your phone was developed over centuries from the other side of the world. The internet was built on publicly funded research. GPS is a state project. No individual created any of that. And this is a pattern. The social intellect is produced collectively and then seized down at the level of the individual. But the risk is carried by everyone, and the profits only flow to a few individuals. Marx wrote, "My own existence is social activity. That which I make of myself for society, and with the consciousness of myself as a social being." The self-made person is not just a myth, it's an ideological necessity. It's the story that capital tells to justify the enclosure of things that belong to all of us and that were created by all of us. And once you start seeing this, it don't stop. The school that taught you to read, medical research behind every drug you've ever taken, all of it, under capitalism, was passed down collectively by countless people who came before you. But it's now owned by someone else and then returned to you at a price. And then we're all told that we're individuals fighting against one another for those things. If production is already collective, then the myth of the self-sufficient individual completely collapses, right? Nobody builds anything from nothing. There's no such thing as the self-made man or woman. Everything sits on top of an enormous foundation of collective social labour. The rags, in rags to riches, were provided for you by someone else. The question was never whether production is social. The question is who controls it and who takes the surplus. And this is what individualism does. It's given to you as if you can drive on your own steam, but ultimately it's exploited so that a small handful of individuals at the top can benefit. So we've seen now, using a few analogies in business and sport, how actually this individualist myth is just an ideology perpetuated by academics, by institutions, and by politicians. Actually, there are so many examples of collectivism in your life. I don't know if this helps, but I think about this quite a lot when I'm walking around where I live now. Imagine a classic Yorkshire terrace, like what I grew up on, right? So let's say there's 10 houses in that terrace. Imagine there's no walls. And when you actually think about that, when you think about 10 individual boilers, 10 individual water meters, 10 individual electric meters, 10 individual gas meters, 10 individual branches of mains coming off each of the main artery of, electricity, gas, internet, whatever it is, 10 individual routers. You get the point, right? Imagine that with no walls, and it just seems ridiculous. And when you actually think about that, you think about who that benefits, right? Certainly not the people living in those houses. Yes, you have individual control over your heating. But when you think about that, when they sell you those things individually, you see that as just your price. But really, you're all in it together, right? But you just don't realise because there's literal walls separating you. Now, I'm not saying we should all live together in communes, but it is just a helpful way I find of visualising it and remembering that lesson, that we're so split out. And so if we're going to make change in the world, we need to do that by working together. We need to recognise our similarities more than we recognise our differences. And it's a great power that we have. Stops the ruling class from separating us outright, whether that be through liberal identity politics or through far-right agendas around racism or bigotry, whatever it may be. We have more in common than we have that separates us, whether that's the working class in the UK or the working class in Indonesia. We have more in common than politicians tell us. And the more we believe that we're all individuals, the easier it is for us to believe those narratives. So let me leave you with the words of Grace Blakely once again. Socialism is not something that can be delivered from on high by benevolent leaders. It is something that must be built from the ground up, That doesn't mean that leaders aren't important. It doesn't mean that elections aren't important. But it does mean that socialist leaders and electoral coalitions have to be grounded in popular power. That's the difference between a left populist project and reform. The latter can succeed, momentarily, as an elite-led AstroTurf campaign. The former cannot. We can't keep falling for the hero-victim narrative that's infected so much of our politics. It's a dead end. It's a path to a hollow, shallow politics that can never stand the test of time, let alone a confrontation with the most powerful institutions in a capitalist society. That's what you're fighting against. And by seeing yourself as an individual, you are allowing them to win. So think about this next time you're out in the street. Say hello to your neighbour. Get to know your neighbour. Help your neighbours out. Recognise that you're in a community, right? Even though you're all separated by walls and you've all got your individual boilers, you are a community. We've just had all that forced apart over time. So hopefully there's one thing you take away from that. It's that we are stronger together. Thanks so much for watching, especially if you've made it to the end. Really, really appreciate that. Just a reminder, there's a few ways to help me do this full time. This one took me a while to get out. I had some competing priorities, one of those being my job, which I'd love to not have to do. So the more time I can spend reading, recording, researching, learning, the more videos I can make and the quicker I can make them. So there's a few ways you can support me. One, obviously, watch this, share it with everybody that you know, get the word out. The more this is shared, the better the algorithm loves it and the faster I can grow. Follow me on social media. And if you really enjoyed it, maybe consider buying me a coffee. That helps fund subscriptions to key magazines and newspapers that I read just to keep up to date with things, and also helps me buy any books that I need or access things online. Every little helps anyway. All the links are in the description. Hit the Linktree button and you can go through there. Follow me on social media as well. The more I can grow there, the more eyes I can get on my YouTube and my Substack content. And most importantly, subscribe to my Substack, where I do deep dives into all sorts of stuff, from the political economy of Easter eggs all the way through to the situation going on in Iran right now. So jump over to my Substack and hit subscribe. And thanks so much for sticking around. Thanks so much for watching. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next time.